is there any actual proof of God, or is it all just a bunch of irrational claims made by people with an emotional attachment to their ideas, whether it makes any kind of rational sense or not? We'll find out today as we continue our exploration of claims made about God by people with a vested interest in pushing the idea. Strap in, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Due to popular demand, we're going to get back to North Coast Church and child pastor Christopher Hilken, as he thinks he's saying something worthwhile, but he's really only proving that he's got no clue what proof actually is. This is a very common problem with the religious. I'm not sure that Chris has any idea what different proofs are either, as this is more of a continuation of his last video. But I can't say that's really all that surprising. These people don't seem to understand what logic or reason or, proof actually is. So, let's get into it.
Hey Daily Dosers, Chris Hilken here. We're talking about more evidence for God's existence.
What do you mean, more evidence? You haven't gotten anywhere close to evidence yet. You've just made empty claims and wild rationalizations and pretend it said anything of substance about your imaginary friend. You can't act like spinning a narrative based on your emotionally derived wishful thinking somehow actually gets you anywhere. It just doesn't work that way.
So yesterday we talked about this really simple question. Why is there something rather than nothing?
And I tore that completely apart in my response. Not that you care, because, as I keep saying, the religious, they really aren't interested in reality. They only want to validate their feelings and cling to their emotionally comforting faith because their entire self-image and worldview is wrapped around it like a spring. It must be true because they can't survive without it. At least that's what they keep telling themselves. Too bad they're completely wrong.
In fact, if nothing isn't capable of doing anything, some people might say, well, nothing can do a lot of stuff. But that's a parapraxis. It's a mistake in terms. It's like if I said, well, baseball players can steal second base, so I can steal money. What I'm doing is I'm using the same term and I'm meaning two different things.
Which, if you notice, the religious try all the time. They will use the term faith to mean whatever is most convenient at the moment. They can't just pick one definition and stick with it. They have to wander all over the court and pretend it means whatever they happen to want it to mean at this specific moment. Is it the belief in gods, as the dictionary defines it, or is it belief in anything? I don't know. What's necessary right now? Sticking to a single definition is very, very difficult for the religious. I spend a lot of time playing the dictionary game around here because I really have to, and being very careful defining my terms and using them consistently. They don't. Wonder why.
Like right now, if I said, what am I holding in my hand, and I opened it, what might you say?
Nothing would be the popular term, but honestly, it isn't nothing. You've actually got air in there along with a lot of other particles. That's not nothing. This is why defining our terms narrowly means so much. Besides, I thought he was going to get to something new, and so far he's just referring back to something he already did. Come on, Chris, get to something useful.
Nothing. There's nothing in your hand, which is actually remarkably untrue.
Yes, it is. Just like the claim that atheists say the universe came from nothing. It's remarkably untrue. That's why I spend a lot of time poking holes in the ideas of these absurd religious videos, because they aren't interested in integrity or honesty or keeping to the facts. They'll do whatever it takes to reach their emotionally comforting conclusion, whether it's at all defensible or not. Anybody surprised?
On top of the amount of cells that take place on the actual surface of my hand, the bacteria, there's air here, there's pockets, there's microbacteria, there's particles, there's probably dead skin, which is kind of gross. So saying nothing and saying, well, before there was anything, there was nothing, and some people might argue, well, what if nothing created everything? But you're giving properties to something that has no thing.
No, that's you. Because your God can't be shown to exist, yet you have arbitrarily assigned him characteristics that you cannot demonstrate that a real existent God actually has. It's just absurd to see how backwards these people have, well, just about everything. They claim that we think it all came from nothing, when in fact that's exactly what their religion teaches. God made everything out of nothing. Then they think we're assigning characteristics to nothing, when in fact that's exactly what they are doing with their God. It's just more proof that they are entirely misreading the situation and pretending that we are just like they are. And we're not. We are absolutely nothing like them, thank goodness.
It doesn't have properties. It's not a vacuum. It's not pre-molecular bacteria. It's nothing. There is no thing.
And what did God create everything out of, according to you? What is it that he used magic to construct the universe out of? What's your answer again? Starts with an N, ends with a G, 7 letters. Come on, you can do it.
So today we ask the question, which is very simple. If the universe then had a point at which it began, because before that there was nothing.
And how do you know that? Where did that nugget of supposed information come from? Because ultimately, that's what all of this comes down to. It's what the core assertion is based on. The idea that somehow he knows that there was nothing before the Big Bang. Well, how does he know that? I bet that's another question that will go entirely unanswered.
So at one moment, everything that is inside of our space-time continuum, which means space, time, and matter, had a beginning. Then we can ask the question, well, if everything started at a certain point, and everything that we observe in our universe that begins has a cause?
Notice how he said everything in our universe, right? So he's not completely ignorant. Well, not completely anyway. Not that bright either, of course, but he's at least got sort of a grasp on it, even if he's not paying attention to the words coming out of his mouth. So if everything in our universe has a cause, why in the world are you trying to assert that things outside of our universe, things that happened before our universe began, have to follow those same rules? And again, why do you ignore those rules when it comes to your God? Try for some consistency. Give it a shot.
Our universe had a point at which it began, therefore our universe must have a cause.
Which says nothing about what might have caused it. Seriously, we're still talking about the last video, aren't we? He's about a third of the way through this one, and he hasn't said anything new yet. Focus, Chris. Or is this just going to be an entire series of videos just retreading the same old tired, let's be honest, entirely debunked material over and over and over again? Come on, Chris. Don't disappoint us. You've got to do better than that.
Must have a purpose.
And that's where you entirely leave the reservation. There is no purpose evident. That's something you are arbitrarily assigning. It's something that you've yanked straight out of your ass and slapped on the table for all to see, and you're hoping nobody's actually going to call you out on it. Well, too bad. I am. You're just wrong.
Because what thing that's transcendent means bigger than the space-time continuum would create everything so intricately and not have a purpose or a cause behind it?
Yet more wild assertions presented entirely without evidence. There's no reason to think that there's a transcendent anything. As I said, if there is a cause, and there's no reason to think that there is, because the physical laws of our universe may not apply to things outside of it, but even if there is, that doesn't mean that it's alive, or sentient, or had any purpose whatsoever. It doesn't mean that it still exists. It doesn't mean that it cares about us. It doesn't mean anything. Let's be really honest. It doesn't mean anything. That's where you need to produce evidence that any of these claims accurately describe anything that is demonstrably real. Now, I trust Chris is going to get to that soon, right? No? Wonder why.
So a causal agent means that something or someone, we would call that a personal being, means that they can make person-like decisions. They are conscious. They can rationalize. Something personal created everything.
Still shitting yourself, I see. Because this is exactly where he's just rationalizing wildly, trying to get to the conclusion that he really wishes were true, and just stapling all of the things he believes for irrational reasons onto his argument without ever producing any evidence of any kind, even once. I mean, I could do the same thing. That cause must be invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. Why? Because I want it to be. And all of the characteristics that I've just stapled onto my imaginary creative being, well, they work because that's how I want to think of my imaginary fairy friends. My invention, my rules. Repeat with any idea you care to name. It doesn't make any of it rational.
Because we see this conscious choice all throughout nature.
Really? Do tell. Because there's a difference between proving that it's true and interpreting things and running them through your religious filter to come to the conclusion that you really wish were true. It's why science works very hard to remove subjectivity. It doesn't matter what the interpretations might be. It matters what the evidence actually shows beyond the subjective opinions of the observers. Interesting how religion doesn't even make an attempt to do that, huh?
So we say this very simply put this way. Everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. The universe has a purpose.
And that's still not demonstrable. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat it, you haven't shown it to be true. Try being honest for once. It's really not that hard.
Purpose and cause always point to intelligence. There really is no exception.
Says who? Have you observed absolutely every creation in the universe to make that determination? And for the sake of argument, just because I have to do more than just laugh at this guy and point out how irrational he is, let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that everything he says is true. Now, how does he know that it's his God that done it? Because that's the next big question on the block. He might believe it, but belief means nothing. I want to know how he knows it. Where is his evidence? And of course, his whole spiel falls apart again because he's got none of that, does he? So we keep going around and around and around in the circles. Bad assertions based on emotional desires, plugging in unsupported and ultimately unsupportable conclusions because they really want them to be true, not because they have any reason to think that they are. And for some reason, this is supposed to impress people. Why is that again?
So all we have to do now is prove that the universe began to exist.
Which doesn't mean that it just appeared magically. It could have come from something else that was pre-existing. It could have done things with physical laws that we can't even imagine. You simply cannot assert something without being able to show that it happened the way that you think that it did. But if you did that, you wouldn't be able to comfort the gullible, which is really what this is all about.
Well, there's 3 different ways that the universe came to be.
And I'm sure he's going to get absolutely all of it wrong. Why? Because this is ultimately, before I even hear it, a false trilemma. He is saying that there are only 3 ways, and I predict he'll just hand wave away 2 of them and then declare the last one, the one that he really wants to be true. Well, it must be the case because there are no other alternatives. Guys, this is Apologetics 101. It's terrible thinking, if you can even call it that at all.
The first one is that the universe is necessary.
Where did that even come from? Necessary for what? You can't show that anything is necessary. This is really going down a bizarre path. All right, let's see what else he has to say.
Something that's necessary means that it exists out of the function of itself, like numbers. Ideas like numbers are a great example of something that exists necessarily.
Numbers don't exist because they are necessary. We made them up. Nowhere in nature can you find a 1. It's a concept that we invented because of our desire to define things. Without humans, numbers wouldn't exist, and there would be no one here to make them up, assuming there were no aliens or other intelligent life forms. The same goes for your God, too, just in case you were wondering.
If there was never a human or never anyone ever, and there was just this distant planet where there were 2 rocks sitting beside each other, there would still be 2 rocks, even if no one had ever qualified the idea of two-ness.
Which isn't relevant. If no one had even considered what two-ness might be, it would be entirely irrelevant. You only have the concept of two-ness because you've been taught that it's a worthwhile idea. Numbers and mathematics, for that matter, are a language that we invented as a means to describe our surroundings. They aren't inherent in reality. You're just wrong.
It's an idea. It takes place. Wherever there's a set of things, there's a number that goes along with it.
And there you go again, just rationalizing your way back to your conclusion. Your brain works a certain way, mostly based on indoctrination, and therefore you think about things in a certain way. That doesn't mean that things are the way that you imagine them to be inherently. I mean, take some animal that can see into the infrared. Hell, imagine some animal that can only see in the infrared. If that animal were sentient and capable of intelligent thought, then to them, infrared vision would be natural. They couldn't imagine that it wasn't perfectly normal and possible for pretty much everyone. It might even be thought of as necessary. Is it? No. It's just the way that those particular animals look at the universe. You need to be able to remove yourself from the equation and look at things objectively, Chris. And this is where you keep getting into trouble.
Now, obviously, if there was some ancient civilization that saw 2 rocks, they wouldn't say 2, but they would still have some understanding that there is a duality of them. There are 2 of them.
No and no. Not until you can prove it with objectively demonstrable evidence. Go get some. We'll wait.
So numbers exist out of necessity. They have to exist because things exist and things have numbers. Is the universe a number? No. The universe is an idea. It's not a set of numbers. So it doesn't exist out of necessity.
Nor does anything else. Now, keep in mind that there are a lot of theists out there who think that their gods are necessary beings. They have to exist. Why? Because they want them to exist. But your wishes and dreams have no bearing on reality. Reality is what it is, whether you like it or not. That's why we rely on evidence to find out what's actually true, while ignoring our personal subjective biases about what we wish was true. And guess who doesn't do that?
The other way it can exist is it can exist out of Eternality, it means it's always been here.
You know, like you want to think that your God does. And no, you have no evidence to suggest that's the case. Of course, we don't think that the universe has always been here, at least not since the 1920s when it was first suggested. We've had direct evidence with cosmic background radiation since 1959, even though it was first predicted back in 1948. Previous to that, the religious pushed the idea that, well, of course the universe has always been here. Then, when that was disproven, they just moved the goalposts to this new and equally asinine line of quote-unquote reasoning. Religion is always looking for anything that will help them get to their pre-existing conclusion. Nothing will change their mind. Funny how that works.
Well, we've already proven that it can't be that way. Albert Einstein proved that, the Hubble telescope proved that, the red light shift, George Lemaitre, they all proved that the universe hasn't always been here, so it can't be eternal.
Nor do we think that it is, because this is just a straw man that he can wave his arms and dismiss because he wasn't going to take it seriously to begin with. It was mentioned only so that it seems like he's actually evaluating other possibilities, even though none of these possibilities are even credible. Now, the one that he's going to get to, well, that isn't credible either, but he's just playing logical fallacy bingo, so what do you expect?
So our third option is that the universe is contingent.
That isn't demonstrated, because again, this is just a false trilemma fallacy, because that's all the religious can do. Pick the option that they really want, put it behind one or more easily dismissed options, and pretend that they somehow found the truth. Except that makes no rational sense whatsoever. The only way to conclude that contingency is the proper answer is to demonstrate that contingency is the proper answer. You don't get to use it as the last idea standing behind a limited number of arbitrarily chosen options.
A contingent being, or a contingent set, or a contingent something means it needs something for its existence.
But it could be something else that wasn't a god. That's not an option that the religious are willing to consider. This whole thing is just Chris trying to lead his gullible followers around by the nose to reach the conclusions that he wants them to reach, because it makes him feel good to do so. Come on, it's so blatantly obvious. He can't be unaware of what he's doing, can he?
And that something can't be itself, right? If you asked me where light come from, I could never say, I made myself.
Wait. He just said where light came from. Twice. Look at it again.
If you asked me where light come from, I could never say, I made myself. Where light come from. That would be what we call tautology. You'd be arguing in a circle. Some people go, well, the universe made itself. That's impossible.
Nobody says that. Citation needed. The only people who pull that crap out are people like Chris here, who are inventing things out of whole cloth in an attempt to discredit the non-religious. More dishonesty from the God-botherers. Anybody surprised?
Because the universe would have to be there in order to make itself, and it wasn't there until after it made itself, so universes can't make themselves. So what are we looking for? When you ask me where did I come from, what do I have to appeal to? A cause outside of myself. My cause would be my parents. If I find a rock on the ground, the cause would be off the side of that mountain. Well, why is that mountain there? Well, that mountain sprang into existence when the original expansion of the universe happened.
Yeah, not quite. There's a lot more that happened between the original expansion of the universe and a mountain. It was billions and billions of years between those events. Is this something else that he doesn't get? Now, the actual answer for the mountain here is tectonic activity. Someone in Chris's shoes really ought to know that.
Everything has a cause to it.
Be careful here, because I'm going to expect you to prove that whatever answer you provide is actually so. I don't care what you believe. I care what you can prove. If there is a cause, something beyond the we don't know, which is the actual answer, of course, it needs corroboratory evidence. And I predict you'll have absolutely none of that.
Now you take the whole universe and you say, well, the universe is a thing. It's not necessary. It's not eternal, which means it needs a cause, but the cause can't be itself. Well, what's outside of the universe? That must be powerful enough to create the universe.
Again, he's trying to assert things that he simply can't demonstrate. Powerful in what way? Because I'm sure he'll get to intelligent and purposeful and all of that, all of which is just thrown out there with nothing at all to support it. Because, who needs proof, right?
Ordered enough to sustain the universe.
What makes you think that the universe needs anything to sustain it? The universe seems to be doing just fine without constant attention and supervision. Once again, this is just him trying to get to his God without having any good reason to think that his God is real.
And intelligent enough to put complexity in the universe.
And that's right off the rails, because there's no evidence that it, whatever it was, needed to be intelligent or anything else. That's a wish, not a demonstrable fact. You can't get to your imaginary friend without being inherently dishonest in your reasoning. It's why people laugh at you.
When we find something that has the power to create worlds, has power to create everything that we know, we would consider that thing the most powerful being ever, which is what we all kind of mean when we say God. Second evidence for the proof of God.
Not hardly, because we see natural forces creating worlds all the time. Through those things that we've got called telescopes. You know what we've never seen? An intelligence create one. Now, I'm not denying that a sufficiently advanced alien species might be able to do it. Who knows? Maybe someday we might be able to do it ourselves. But that doesn't mean that only intelligence can create a world or a universe or anything else. But that's the assertion that people like Chris here have to go with because they are desperate to get to their emotionally comforting conclusion, even though none of the things they claim are demonstrable in any way, shape, or form. This is the difference between rationality, starting with the evidence and going wherever it leads, and rationalism, starting with the conclusion and backfilling in anything that will get you there. Chris is doing the latter. Intelligent people do the former. The idea that your feelings mean a damn thing when it comes to reality, that's absurd on its face, but it's the only thing that the religious can do. Those outside of their silly emotional cults, well, we just roll our eyes and laugh. Because, really, what else can we do? You can't reason with the inherently unreasonable. It makes the whole thing a giant joke.
Boom, dicky bum, 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 dicky bum.